This is a short video explanation to the assignments for Chapter 29. Chapter 29 is going to deal with 1912 to 1916, and we're going to learn a little bit about President Wilson and get us into the beginning of World War I. So please download the questions for Chapter 29, beginning on page 661 for the 15th edition of American Pageant. Sometimes the page numbers are a little bit off if you have the different edition, but the text is still the same. All images within this presentation are in the public domain. Please don't hesitate to give me an email if you have any questions regarding this video explanation. Thank you. As we get into Chapter 29, there's a couple things I wanted to point out to you. Number one, Chapter 29 kind of focuses on Woodrow Wilson, and I wanted to kind of point out that there's a famous cartoon here, and it's the Republican Party is divided by the Bull Moose Party, and the glasses represent Teddy Roosevelt. So the Republican Party representing Roosevelt, and in this case Taft. Taft was president. Roosevelt challenges Taft. Roosevelt was president for approximately 7 years. Roosevelt becomes president when William McKinley dies in office, and he serves the rest of that term, and then he runs for another full 4 years, and then he steps down. So he doesn't serve 2 full complete terms. He steps down. Roosevelt steps down, and Roosevelt's vice president, Taft, becomes president. Taft becomes president for 4 years, from 1908 to 1912. So then in the year 1912, Roosevelt decides to run again after sitting out for 4 years. So this cartoon represents Taft and the Republican Party divided then by another Republican, but he runs as a independent, and they called him the Bull Moose. So the Bull Moose Party divides the Republican Party, and the result is then Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, gets elected. The donkey represents the Democrat. And so you can look here at this chart, and you have then Woodrow Wilson with the Electoral College vote. You only need a majority of 538 votes. Majority of 538 is 270. Clearly a landslide victory for Wilson in the Electoral College vote, but 59% of Americans vote against him. He only gets 41% of the American vote. But that doesn't necessarily matter. The only thing that matters, according to our Constitution, is the Electoral College vote. So I wanted to point that out to you. The number 6, we have these results that you can plug into there. So Chapter 29 kind of talks about Wilson's presidency and kind of gets us real close then to the entrance into World War I. World War I starts in 1914. The United States does not get into it until 1917, shortly after Wilson gets elected to his second term. One thing I wanted to point out is that eventually then William Howard Taft, this is the previous or the former President Taft, eventually gets then appointed to be Chief Justice on the Supreme Court. So this is the same Taft that was president. And some other larger-than-life characters. We have John Pershing. John Pershing was the general first sent to Mexico to chase after Pancho Villa, but then eventually John Pershing was the Supreme United States Commander in World War I. And then you also have this interesting conflict the United States has with Mexico south of the border, and later we find out that Germany is very excited about keeping the United States busy looking south instead of looking east across the Atlantic Ocean. And so some of the provocation that occurs in Mexico is somewhat sponsored, if not encouraged, by the Germans. And as you get through this chapter, you're going to also find that there's lots of conflicts that occur in the Atlantic Ocean when you have ships being sunk, British ships being sunk, French ships being sunk, eventually American casualties on board these ships. One of the most grievous was the sinking of the Lusitania. Americans on board were killed, innocent women and children. It's an interesting story. It's somewhat interesting to find out that maybe the Lusitania wasn't quite that innocent. Were there in fact armaments on board? Was the United States in fact neutral, or were we secretly supplying the British with weapons and using women and children as human shields? That would be the German perspective. The United States perspective, of course, was the bloodthirsty Germans, savages, killing women and children, sinking, innocent civilian ships. So the chapter ends with the election of Woodrow Wilson for a second term, and the idea that one of the things that Wilson used in his campaign was the slogan, "Vote for me to come back as president because I kept the United States out of war. I kept us out of war." And then shortly into Wilson's second term, we go to war. So Wilson did all he could, he felt, to keep us out of war. He becomes president for a second term, and then we go backed into a corner. We feel we have no chance. We have no chance to avoid this war. So the next chapter, chapter 30, will take us into World War I. And an additional assignment that I have for you in chapter 29 is to watch this video. This video is on YouTube. You'll find the link on the website. Watch this video called Shell Shock. It's about 45 minutes. It's a great video series, The Century, America's Time, 1914 to 1919. This video called Shell Shock, and then answer these questions. Short 11 questions over this video. So that concludes the video explanation of the assignments for chapter 29. All the images within this video presentation are in the public domain. Please do not hesitate to email or give me a phone call if you have any questions. Thank you.